Welcome to Marshall University Microsoft Forefront Identity Manager Implementation Showcase iSeminar. Our featured guest speaker for today's presentation is John Cutler, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at Marshall University. If you're facing any audio difficulties, please dial in using the number on the audio section of the GoToMeeting screen. At the end of today's presentation, we will be taking questions posted in the web conference questions pane. The questions pane is available in the attendee control panel. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting IDM Engine.
Hi, thank you. Colleagues, good afternoon. It's approximately 2 p.m. here in Cleveland, Ohio. On behalf of IDM Engine, I'd like to thank approximately 40 institutions that have dialed in, including Victoria College, West Virginia State University, the College of the Bahamas, University of Laverne, Broadview University, and Potomac State College, along with several other higher ed and K-12 institutions who dialed in for today's iSeminar to learn about Marshall University's Microsoft Forefront Identity Manager project implementation with IDM Engine. Today's featured guest is John Cutler. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at Marshall University. For some of you who are unfamiliar with the IDM Engine, IDM Engine is the #1 identity management platform in higher ed and K-12 with over 50 clients, including Marshall University, Los Angeles Unified School District, Los Angeles Community College District, University of Southern Indiana, California State University, Los Angeles, Francis Howell School District, State of North Dakota, and Salt Lake Community College. After John's briefing, we will do a deeper dive into what IDM Engine is. So at this stage, I'll pass the platform over to a featured guest presenter, John. Give me 1 second. John, you're unmuted. You can start talking now.
All right. Good afternoon, Vincent. Thank you for your time, and good afternoon to my fellow higher ed colleagues that are out there listening on this iSeminar. Just want to share a little bit about some of the lessons learned and some of our experience with the implementation of the Microsoft Forefront Identity Management Engine. Was there anything else you wanted to say at the moment, Vincent, or?
Sorry, I got a little cut off. John. No, I think we're good, John. So, you can start, and what we'll do is, and, just so everybody knows, once John finishes with his part of the presentation, we will kick the session over to our audience. We'll open the lines for Q&A. So, I think at this point, that's all, that I would like to add. John?
Very good. Well, I'll go ahead and proceed. First, just a little bit of summary of what we're talking about here. Marshall University had worked with Campus EAI, their identity management team that's now referred to as IDM Engine. We already had a relationship with Campus EAI with our student portal. We were using and are currently using the My Campus portal, and just because of that relationship, we went ahead and explored using the professional services of Campus EAI to help us with our identity management solution. Just a little bit about Marshall University for those folks that are not familiar with us. We are a West Virginia public institution in Huntington, West Virginia in the United States. We're a master's large university with about a little over 13,000 students, a mixture of undergraduate and graduate, a little over 2,100 staff and faculty, quite a number of degree programs. From an IT perspective, we are an Ellucian banner shop. We're currently at banner 8.x, and those of you all that are banner shops know that there's different point version releases. As with most banner shops, we also are looking at the next generation banner platform, Banner XE, and so our enterprise apps team are anxiously exploring that in a test dev environment. From an infrastructure perspective, before I was Information Security Officer, I was Director of our Systems Administration team, so very familiar with that. We're an Active Directory shop, if you will. That's our primary identity and authentication source. From an email perspective, we are currently at Exchange 2013 on-premise for employees, and we're using Office 365 for students and alumni, which is a hosted service. At the time of the engagement, when we worked with Campus EAI, we were still at Exchange 2010, and we were still using the Live at EDU offering, and so we did do a little bit of a transition between the way we provision accounts in Live at EDU and the way that Microsoft has encouraged schools to do it now with Office 365. Again, we are very comfortable from a Microsoft platform. We've got SharePoint from a collaboration space. Obviously, we're using FIM, Blackboard Learn 9 for our learning management system. Campus EAI, we partner with them on the My Campus student portal. And from a network perspective, we use Cisco on the infrastructure there, both wired and wireless. I mention those things because each of these products and platforms, in many cases at the core of them is the identity of the individual. Who is it that is needing to authenticate to the service? What's their role? What access or services do we offer to them? And that was one of our driving points with wanting to do a better job with our identity management system is we don't want to have to manage multiple silos of identity, multiple silos of passwords. That's certainly frustrating for the end user. It's very difficult to support. It's very expensive to support, so we were looking for a better way. Some of the pain points, we, as probably many organizations, have some sort of homegrown account management system. We were wanting to move away from that and have something that's supportable and off the shelf. As most IT and higher ed organizations these days, we're looking to be as efficient as we can and to help support the mission of the university, and sometimes reinventing the wheel is not the best way to do that. We were also wanting to do a common credential for single sign-on. It's my understanding in many banner shops, banner institutions, there'll be a banner ID, in some cases a numeric ID and PIN that you use to authenticate to the banner applications. And then you may have network IDs or logins, whether you're a NetWare shop or an Active Directory shop or use some other sort of authentication. So often juggling multiple credentials, and that, as I mentioned before, is confusing and frustrating to our students and faculty and staff. And needing to do more of a single sign-on, it just made sense for us to go in this direction. We were also looking for self-service password management, and there were certainly a number of products that were available, but if just simply doing self-service password management, you wind up having to duplicate a lot of things that we see that we have the underpinnings or the infrastructure already here with Forefront Identity Management. With our homegrown account management system, certainly we were very proficient at creating identities, but in many cases those identities were basically frozen to what they were at the time of creation, unless if an individual came back to us and said, hey, my role has changed or this information has changed. Updating that information, refreshing that information in Active Directory was at best a batch or an ad hoc process. So we very much wanted to leverage some of the role information that we knew exists in Banner. Certainly that role information we needed on the student portal side, the My Campus portal, and so the Forefront and Identity Management project became a good vehicle to help achieve that. And then finally, as I mentioned, a number of services out there not needing or not wanting to go out and touch each of those services every time there's a role change. And if we had some common agreed to group of services that are available to students, to employees, to faculty, to graduate students, to all those different roles that you have in your environment, if we could make that information available to our identity and authentication system, that certainly would be very, very helpful and advantageous for us. So just want to speak a few minutes here about our implementation approach. As most technical staff, we want to get to the fun part, right? We want to open the shrink wrap and insert the disk and install the product and get starting. That product is going to solve the problem. But in reality, we all know that it's the process that helps solve the problem. In some cases, it's the process that is the problem, and needing to adjust and redirect that process. So one of the things that the campus EAI team and the IDM engine team helped us with is, but before we get too excited about installing the product, let's make sure that we understand the process as it is now and the process that you would like to see it moving forward. They helped us go through and basically inventory the resources that we have available, not only the technical resources, but the information resources. Many of us have no shortage or, getting the technical resources in terms of servers or storage or memory or interfaces. That's not the problem. It's understanding where the data is, in some cases where the most accurate data is, concepts of authoritative source, who has the most authoritative source on who's a student here? Should that be IT or should that be the registrar? Is IT the most current indicator of whether you're an employee or is HR? And working through that process. Implementing and testing this design, that was very important too. Part of this is automating things, and it's difficult when you try and automate something with as many moving parts as identity in a production environment. It can be a little daunting. There's probably a number of horror stories out there of folks that were anxious to go ahead and implement a solution, and when they started moving things around, when they started updating identities or creating identities or adding and removing privileges, there was unexpected results of that. So having a good test environment is important in a successful implementation. And once you've tested that, then what you've learned in test, then deploy that into production. Obviously, with any good implementation plan, you want to kind of do a little post-mortem after you move into production and see what's working well, what needs to be tweaked. And when everything is working to your satisfaction, then you would want to get rid of or discontinue use of a legacy system. So that was the approach that we were taking. In terms of the outcome, obviously we feel successful in implementing the Forefront Identity Management product, including the self-service management pieces. Basically, for those folks that are not familiar with that allows an account holder to set some number of challenge response questions. They register for self-service password reset. They set up these challenge response questions, and in the event that they forget their password or need to reset it, they can go to a web-based portal, answer the correct responses, and they're allowed to reset their password. There are additional workflow pieces there that you can enable or disable as suit your environment. For instance, we generate an email to the account holder confirming that this action is taken. Obviously, this sort of activity is logged. There is additional features there if you want to have SMS or text message notification we are still in the process of implementing those steps. We also were needing to automate the creation of our Exchange and email accounts. Exchange for on-premise and Office 365 or Live at EDU at the time of deployment. Those of you all that are already doing Live at EDU or Office 365 probably have an understanding of this process, or if you're not doing this, just I can kind of summarize it, how those steps work. Basically, you do a connector between your campus identity source or directory and Office 365 and establish criteria for every user, every object that's within either the entire directory or a container or an OU within that directory. Then you will provision an account for that individual up in the hosted Office 365 space. So that process has changed just a little bit between Live at EDU and Office 365, but the important piece there is understanding and establishing where those accounts are going to be created, where FIM is going to create those accounts in Active Directory, and subsequently that your synchronization with Office 365 is going to use that source to provision the accounts in the cloud or in the hosted environment. I talk about like the student roles here. Those of you all that are familiar with directory environments, you know there's a couple of different ways that you can designate attributes about a user. You can actually directly apply that to an account. You can have a custom attribute or a descriptive label on the account that says, student, employee, staff. You can put that user object in a container in Active Directory. You can have a student's container, a faculty container, an employee container. The challenge with putting that object in a container is it can only be in one container at a time. I cannot be in a student OU and an employee OU simultaneously. And perhaps I skipped over this point at the beginning of the presentation. We wanted to have a common identity, single sign-on, and not have to juggle multiple accounts. So in my case, my username is Cutler1. There is only one Cutler1 object in our directory, but Cutler1 obviously has been a student and am currently an employee, and at different times I'm adjunct faculty. So there's multiple roles that I have. It's not possible for me to live in multiple containers, but I can be part of multiple groups. And so the solution for the implementation that we chose was to create domain security groups for these different roles. And as the user account is created and as my role is assigned or updated, I get added and or removed to one or more groups, and that works well. Those groups can be used by other applications, such as the Campus CAI portal, such as our network wireless infrastructure, or our identity services engine on the Cisco side of the house. It can be used for provisioning of different licenses for our Office 365 environment, access to different, default folders and groups and sites on SharePoint. So all of those things, those of us that are in Active Directory environments, we know that there's lots of potential to do things based on users and groups. That the challenge is, how do we not spend our whole day, clicking and dragging and dropping people between groups? How do we automate that process? Part of that automation is done on our banner side. One of the members of our team, Mr. Brent Maynard, who's over our Enterprise Apps group, he worked with us in creating what's called population selections, or banner speak, pop cells, for those folks that need ad hoc security groups, or groups that may be updated kind of on a batch basis. And certainly students and class roles and things like that are perfect because the source of that information is Banner anyway. And through creation of this population selection group, that can be passed to the Microsoft Forefront Identity Management meta directory or synchronization engine, and then that can be updated into Active Directory. We're still learning about all the different things that we can use with FIM. I've used, and I've heard the expression, putting your hand in a drawer full of sharp knives. You have to be careful not to thrust it in too quickly, because what we are doing with FIM, and FIM at a high level is just synchronizing or applying business rules between source information and a target information. We want to make sure that we understand how those rules are applied, when those rules get evaluated, from a reasonableness perspective, how often you want to evaluate it. Does it make sense to evaluate someone's student status every 5 minutes? Does it make sense to evaluate that once a semester or once a week? And how much time is involved in that evaluation? So those all are factors that you want to consider. Talking about some of the lessons that we learned here as part of this implementation. Don't necessarily assume that because you're pulling information out of your HR system that everything is pristine. And this is not intended at a jab at our HR group or anybody's HR group. Just as in IT, we know it's difficult to keep track of all the moving parts in a university. Same thing on the personnel side. But the acronym there, GIJO, garbage in, garbage out. Your identity services, your roles, and the information you're putting into Active Directory is going to be only as accurate as what your source data is. So be sure to include early on those business units, those authoritative sources of data within the university that you plan on using. Certainly HR from an employee perspective, the registrar and your admissions team from a student perspective. If you're looking at alumni applications or research applications, also realize that right out of the gate, you may not be able to automate provisioning and management of 100% of your accounts and 100% of your roles on day one. Don't be discouraged at that. We weren't able to do that, and part of that is the nature of higher ed. As wonderfully diverse and challenging as this environment is, sometimes it can be a little frustrating on the technologist side. Understand your identity management processes. Again, don't automate a process that you don't understand, and don't necessarily automate exactly how you're doing it now. If you're doing a manual process, there may be a better, more efficient way. Certainly, some of the expertise that you'll have available through Campus CAI, their services team, as well as other member schools, we're always willing to talk about what we've learned, what we'd like to do better. If we had to do it all over again, perhaps change this piece or that piece. So share that knowledge and work with other schools. I mentioned about the automation piece, and I say this with a little bit of grin, but Forefront Identity Management is ruthlessly effective in synchronization. So whatever you tell it to synchronize, it is going to try its hardest to make that happen. And if you have 250,000 objects in your directory and you want to update the spelling of your school name, or you want to evaluate, the case sensitivity of a state or city name, it will do that, and it will plow through every single object and for what you want done. So that's kind of a point back to the test environment. Having a test environment not only as you're starting this project, but as you continue on from a production environment, it's very beneficial to be able to test in a subset of data or a sandbox that doesn't put your production environment at risk to an unintended outcome. And again, there's a common theme here about testing. So this is kind of a little story to share. We worked very closely with Campus EAI on the test phase, and we actually hosted that test environment here on premise. We had this quarantine from the production environment, but we had a full replica of our Active Directory. We had a replica of our banner data, all the synchronization things that we wanted to do. That all worked exactly the way that we wanted, but a couple pieces that we did not have replicated in test was our Exchange environment. It was, and this perhaps was our IT perhaps our IT team perhaps underestimated the significance of this, but we didn't do Exchange testing in the test environment, and first started looking at that once we went into production, and we found some pieces there that we had to do some additional work on, and had to work with some follow-up steps with the Campus EAI team to resolve those, because we didn't anticipate those or didn't identify those in the test environment. This very much was a team project. There was expertise that Campus EAI and the IDM engine team had that the Marshall team either didn't have or just did not have the time to devote to get that expertise. We didn't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel. Our team is very proud, perhaps could be a word, but we like to understand all parts of the systems that we run. We're generally not content to have an external organization set something up and just say, just if you have any problems, give us a call. We like to understand particularly those core infrastructure pieces, how they work. And so Campus EAI was able to help us feel comfortable that we knew what was going on here, and that we had done our due diligence with testing and implementing the product. From a project management perspective as well, there was a lot of maturity that the Campus EAI team had on just the scoping and scheduling and task management and things like that, and so they help keep our team on track. Part of that is the nature of when you have a smaller IT team, you're part-time architect and part-time firefighter, and often when ideally you'll lay out a project schedule based on having a bunch of folks that can architect and build, but the reality is in many of our environments, when the fire alarm goes off, then we have to take off those builder hats and put our firefighting hats on. And so that often results in unexpected bumps in the planned implementation schedule. So they were able to help either A, keep us on track, or B, get us back on track when those inevitable fires happened. From the Marshall team's perspective, again, I shared that we tend to have we want to do a lot ourselves. There was a service offering that Campus EAI had to host the test environment in their environment, and there was perhaps an argument or a case to be made that there may be some time saved in allowing them to do that. But we felt strongly that we should do that in our environment. We were fortunate to have the server resources, storage resources to be able to create that replica here. And so that was very, very helpful, we felt, on our side in being able to see early on how FIM works, how it interacts with source data coming out of Banner, how it works moving data into Active Directory, or bringing data out of Active Directory to see, do we need to act on that? And again, as I've said several times, we're very, very much want to understand what products and platforms that we implement, and so this project allowed us that latitude. Kind of looking forward, next steps and the roadmap for this project. Even though we have the self-service reset function, that requires the account holder to sign up for that first. So sometimes you get into a chicken and the egg, which comes first sort of scenario. I never registered for self-service password reset. I need to reset my password, but I'm not registered for that, so I need my password to register, so that's a loop. What we want to do is have a process that doesn't unnecessarily burden the service desk organization and the end user, but encourages them to go ahead and get that registration done, and perhaps at the beginning of the semester when their account's created, before they need to reset that, before they forget their password, or before it comes up on a time where we need to expire that password and set a new one. We talked about some of the key services that we set up right out of the gate. The provisioning of the Active Directory user account for network authentication and single sign-on application, role information for those applications that need to differentiate between student, faculty, staff, affiliate, and provisioning of email accounts. But we wanted to be comfortable with the successes there, and then start continuing to leverage that synchronization engine for creating other groups for other systems. We have an emergency notification system through Blackboard Connect. We have the ability to do different groups in there to perhaps send targeted notifications to residence hall students or to particular campus students. So part of the challenge there is, how do we create those groups and maintain those groups? Well, Forefront Identity Management Services is a tool that we can do that. We just need to identify a good source data and create that workflow to make that happen. We have an IT billing system. Again, as the role changes, perhaps we need to update the chargeback system to which department gets the invoice for their network connections or their computer network maintenance fees, things like that. There is some analytics tools that Microsoft has added in subsequent releases to FIM called Behold. We're excited about those tools, but quite frankly, we've not had the time recently to delve into those, and so that's on our roadmap to spend some time implementing. FIM can provision user accounts, and FIM can deprovision user accounts. We have intentionally not enabled it to disable accounts. The extent of deprovisioning is to remove you out of a group. So because that core Immunet account is needed regardless of whether you're an employee or a student, or whether you're actively enrolled or not, we want to keep the account active. And then perhaps at some point, if the account's not being used for an extended period of time, say 2 or 3 semesters, then it may make sense to mothball that account. But our practice is to, once that identity is created, we don't reassign it. There'll never be another Cutler One user created on campus. But if I was solely a student and I left and was gone for 10 years and then came back to work on a master's or a PhD, I could be reissued the Cutler One user identity. So we want to start looking at how we can do that with the FIM product. Certainly, it's capable of doing it. This gets back to how can we map our process? How can we create a process that FIM can implement? Self-service workflows are an option in there with FIM. For instance, if a manager, if there's a resource like a network print queue or a network share or a SharePoint site that's part of a group, say there's athletic department SharePoint site, and only folks that are members of the athletic department can get to that, or there's a there's a set of documentation for a certain class of individual. We could create a self-service workflow there that whoever is the owner of that resource or whoever is the manager of the employee could receive an email notification to say, hey, user Cutler 1 would like to get access to this network printer. Do you approve or deny this request? And based on that workflow, can add that user to the group or remove that user to the group. And workflows can be applied to self-service attribute changes. If there's attributes that you want to store in your directory that are not perhaps stored in Banner, that certainly can be handled through a self-service workflow. We have what we call a vanity email, or some folks call it a canonical email. So even though my username is Cutler1, my email address is john.cutler. But the creation of that, the request of that, the maintenance of that is kind of a self-service user-driven process currently done with some of our legacy tools, and we would like to move that in to a FIM workflow process. Same thing with group aliases. Say a department wants an email alias, or there's a certain conference or grant or something that needs this conference 2005 at marshall.edu, to set those sorts of things up through FIM. And of course, user mail forwarding if they want to forward it from a Marshall address somewhere else. So I've covered a whole lot of material there. Hopefully that's been helpful for the folks that have attended. I guess this time part of the presentation is to allow for some Q&A, and I'm available.
All right, thanks, John. That was extremely informative, and at this point we're going to go ahead and open the lines for our audiences to ask John whatever questions they have. Okay, the lines are open. I would just request everyone to put themselves on mute if they don't have a question, and if they have a question, they can ask now. I am sorry, was that a question? Okay, I don't think so. All right. We got the lines open a couple of minutes, so if somebody wants to ask, I can see that some people are also leaving questions on the question pane. So okay, so I think there's a go ahead. Yeah, please.
Kevin Vadney,
start with your name.
Lethbridge in Alberta, Canada. And I may have missed this, but what was your overall cost for implementation?
Okay. I would have to go back and look at that. Part of that is going to be based on the resources you have. So I think Vincent and his team may want to work with you to answer that, because it really does vary. It's very much not a cookie cutter approach. So
well, I totally agree. I'm looking for ways to ballpark previous implementations at different institutions to help with our budgeting request.
Sure.
Okay. You can get in touch with me. My name is Vincent, Kevin. But like John said, it's basically different folks, different strokes, right? So, from provisioning and deprovisioning side of things, I can give you a ballpark, but everything really depends on the scoping. So what we do is we set up a scoping session with our technical team. We go through, we actually share a discovery document, which we expect our, prospects to share with us. Once they fill that up, they share that with us. We go through, we go through the entire environment in terms of, what is the authoritative data source that they'll be using, what is the user base, inactive, active, faculty, student, staff, or what have you. We got to take all of those factors into consideration. But just to sort of answer your question, we usually do these implementations, say for password management piece and for deprovisioning and provisioning, and say if the target systems are not more than 2 or 3 and the user base is not more than 10K or 15K, if it basically ranges anything between 10 to 30K, we usually do these implementations for anything between 50 to 75K. Does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And
no problem. But you can, like I said, what we'll be doing is we will be sharing John's presentation after this webinar, and the folks on our side who invited you for this party, they'll get in touch with you. They'll send you emails. You can reply back, and you can get in touch with me directly, and we can take this offline. Make sense?
Thank you.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, one question I often get asked is, how long did it take start to finish? And so, again, that sometimes can vary. I think we originally had planned for somewhere in the 16 to 20 weeks time frame. Again, that wasn't all with Campus CAI boots on ground, but certainly some amount of time of the discovery piece on site, which is essential. I can't not stress that enough. And then creating an implementation plan, and then coming back and developing that in a test environment. And depending on what you find in test, you may find that the implementation is very smooth, and you may find, hey, there's a couple pieces that we didn't include. And one of the pieces that I talked about or mentioned the point about not testing email. One of the wrinkles that we had in our environment at that time is the way that our School of Medicine email system and their directory interfaces with the Marshall campus. So Marshall Active Directory is a parent domain of marshall.edu, and we have a child domain of schoolofmedicine.marshall.edu. But yet the Marshall main campus hosts the exchange services. And so as part of the scope, we said, hey, the School of Medicine is not in scope, so we're not going to impact any of their account processes. We're not going to, we want to leave them out of it till we're comfortable with it. But we missed that concept of, not only do we have to tell them what we want it to do, we need to tell it in some cases how to handle those exceptions. And one of those exceptions was, create exchange accounts this way for employees of Marshall University, and create exchange accounts, or in this case, don't create exchange accounts for employees of the School of Medicine, because we need to do that differently. And because we had excluded them from our scope, this is something that Marshall consciously did, we didn't have the attribute information available to FIM to make that decision. How could FIM make the decision whether they were School of Medicine employee or Marshall employee if that information wasn't in the directory to begin with? So that's just kind of an example of you're going to encounter things along the way that may end up needing to be addressed in the middle of the implementation, when ideally maybe they had been caught on the front end in the discovery side. Okay, John, there's a question from Scott Hill from Broadview University. So I'll quote, he's saying, I'm embarrassed to admit that I have no experience for Forefront. I'm interested in the Active Directory integration piece in terms of existing group policies. All right. So there's nothing inherently group policy in Microsoft Forefront Identity services, but where the advantage or the benefit of AD connecting to FIM is in what's called the schema mapping or the metaverse mapping. So FIM already knows the attributes that are available in Active Directory, and it makes it very, very easy to do that initial first name over here is first name over here, last name over here is last name over here. And most of what you do in group policy, group policy can be applied obviously to user objects, to group objects, or to computer objects. So FIM can provision accounts into a particular OU or particular group. FIM can move accounts. FIM can call scripts to do certain things. So FIM becomes that identity engine, not to encroach on that name or that branding that Campus AI has, but it basically is a synchronization engine. It says, here's source information, here's target information, and how do you want me to act on that? Do you want me to compare something and simply put text in a box, or do you want to run a custom DLL? So it truly is a very diverse product, and some things may involve some custom integration or some custom script writing that either you may have the expertise yourself to do, or you can partner with the Campus AI IDM engine team.
Thanks, John. Scott, if you heard that, does that answer your question? Okay, he's saying thank you. Probably does not have a mic on the phone, so which is why he's not talking. Adam has a question. Adam Farrell, I believe, from Bridge Valley. So he's got a question. Let me bring that to you. How many servers did you have to set up for your FIM cluster?
So I think we wound up with a total of 4. So we have a FIM web application server. We went ahead and offloaded the SQL database function to a separate server. We have a third server that does the self-service password management, and because that server, we want the self-service obviously to be internet accessible. So we didn't want to expose the whole of FIM to the internet, only the self-service piece. So we provisioned that on a third server, and then the fourth server is used for was initially our Office 365, or I'm sorry, Live at EDU, but then became our Office 365 synchronization server. Now, when I'm saying distinct servers, I'm not backing up a truck of HP or Dell servers. We are very much a virtual, very comfortable with VMware, but you could do the same thing with Hyper-V. So these are discrete hosts, but I think our biggest CPU and memory consumer, though, is going to be that SQL Server instance. Remember, as with most database processes, the more information that you can keep in memory, the quicker you can process. And when you're doing some of these synchronization events, when you're wanting to do an initial run through of every object in your directory and make sure that it's mapped to an object in FIM, and when you need to reevaluate group memberships and things like that, that can be very database intensive. So that particular host is going to be where you want to focus your resources. Certainly the Campus AI team can give you some recommendations, as well as they partner with Microsoft to help you with sizing based on your environment. But we've been happy with having those 4 distinct roles: the FIM application piece, essentially a SharePoint-like front end, and an MMC front end, the separate database instance, the self-service password management portal, because that was going to be exposed, and then that Office 365 sync function, which those of you all that may be doing that kind of think of the piece that Microsoft gives you there is FIM Lite. It's nothing that you can configure much, but it's doing some of those same sorts of synchronization services. Does that answer the question?
We'll wait for him to respond on the question, but
yes, thank you very much.
Okay, there you go. All right. Thanks, Adam. Scott was also asking about the physical boxes or VMs, and he's saying that's been answered by you too. Just to add to that, we also help out with hosting services. Campus CI has a division called Campus Cloud. We have our own data center. If you wish to host your FIM boxes, and do it, and sort of use us for it, we are more than happy to share costing for hosting and managed services as well. Just to add to that.
If we would look at, because we also run VMware here, and so we would be able to host it ourselves. I was just kind of curious about how many services you'd recommend to offload. So if we would host it ourselves, are we looking at like annual support costs after the initial implementation? I know it varies depending upon what all would be necessary, but that would be, I think, one of the biggest questions that I would have for selling this would be not only an upfront cost, but then a yearly contract cost.
Right. Typically, we, as a part of the contract, we offer 1 month of post-production support. Sort of help you sort of stabilize your production environment. Okay. Right, and sort of shoulder you on, and if there are any niggling issues, with post running your profilers and what have you, we want to be there to sort of assist you for about a month. That we usually put as part of the contract. After that, yes, we share a support contract, options, which vary. So what we do is we do bucket of hours model. For support, so it can vary from 50 hours to 100 to 150 or what have you. So there are 3 different categories. We like to call them gold, silver, and platinum. Again, they differ from how many hours would you want to leverage the support for. So so that is that. I mean, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so basically, let's throw out there, I think like around a $50,000 cost for the initial implementation as an estimate. After we would do that, yeah. There wouldn't be like an annual fee that you have to have just to keep it running. It would just be if support would be necessary then.
Exactly. It's a one-time implementation cost, which we will arrive at after we've done the scoping, which I said, can vary from anything between 50 to 75, depending on what kind of environment you have. And then after that, once you've taken you live, we offer support because we know your system. The other thing, that is very critical is because we spend about 3 to 4 months implementing this, huge and ruthless solution. We expect ourselves to sort of be very well versed with the environment, and which is why most of the schools, Marshall, John, if you want to pitch in, John also has support with us, and we've been supporting his system for almost 2 years. John, you want to pitch in?
Sure. So that was something that we felt very, very strongly that as much as I touted our independence and wanted to know this, we still wanted to know that there was somebody behind this, and particularly Microsoft products are an example. We don't necessarily have a support agreement on Exchange or Active Directory. There's not been a whole lot of things there, but it was our understanding that we just can't pick up the phone and do first support call. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we lost John there for a second. John, can you hear me? I think, Adam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I think we lost John for a second there, but yeah, just to give you, I think he's trying to dial back in, but while he's joining, just to give you a fair idea of how we work. So it's fairly straightforward. Support is also the model that we use is bucket of hours. So you can get in touch with us, get in touch with me, and we can talk about that. But for you to go back to your team, your management, or whoever, I think this should suffice, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we use, I know John mentioned it in his presentation, we use the banner ID, which is we have like a number or a letter with like 8 numbers afterwards for the banner authentication.
Right.
And we have the user ID for their email and logging on to computers. And we would like to, the goal would be eventually so they just don't have to have a couple different ones, that they would just have a user ID that they would use to authenticate, and would get them into their banner piece as well as to Blackboard and email and computer login.
Exactly. Right. And, and John's probably, would have been the right guy to sort of address that. But if you're referring to the, unique identifier, that would, so usually it's the banner ID, that a lot of our clients use, in terms of, identifying, these identities. So, yeah, but in terms of licensing, and other things, we don't usually get into, licensing. Just to give you an idea, historically, IDM Engine was part of implementing almost every identity management solution out there. Then we started focusing a lot of our implementations towards Sun Identity Manager before it was bought by Oracle, right? But now, since 2002 has been released by FIM or Forefront, our focus has been entirely on Forefront, and that is what we've been doing. So. We, like John said, we work very closely with Microsoft. So, if you're interested, we'll put you in touch with, not an account manager, but we'll put you in touch with one of the main guys within Microsoft, educational space, who will work out, help you work out the best licensing cost as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
No problem. Okay. I think, we don't have any more questions, and John seems to have dropped off, or there could be some issue with his his phone. But just to wrap it up, I think we are on top of the hour now, and basically I wanted to thank John for taking our time and sharing his experience with you all, with all his colleagues in America. So. If you can hear me, thank you, John. It was really nice to have you around. We usually do these iSeminars every month. We do at least one a month. John is a busy guy. We were able to get him towards, the festive time. He doesn't have much going on right now, so we got him around December. But we have one webinar we do every month. So for 40 institutions that have dialed into today's briefing, we appreciate your time you've taken out. If you are not sure who to get in touch with, the right person would be me. My name is Vincent, and I'm the Business Development Manager with IDM Engine. Whoever, or you can also get in touch with whoever invited you here. Could be Tiffany, Paul, Betty. You can get in touch with these folks. We will be sending out follow-up emails along with the presentation to all our attendees, and if you're interested, we would be happy to schedule a one-on-one session with our technical team to take this initiative forward for you folks. With that, this is IDM Engine signing off. Thank you, everybody.